The jar slipped. Valentina caught it before it hit the floor, purely by instinct, the way you catch things you've spent your whole life holding without ever being thanked for it. She set it back on the counter, checked the seal, and added it to the pallet. 11:47 p.m. 43 jars of truffle honey packed, 12 to go. A Whole Foods distribution truck arriving at 6 a.m. She did not have time for dropped jars. Her phone lit up. A group text, Gianna's name at the top. Okay, everyone, final head count for the Ferrara Estate weekend. Car service leaves Atlanta Friday at noon. Black tie Sunday. So excited for the celebration. She scrolled. 14 names. Her mother, her father, 3 cousins, Dominic's family, his college roommates, his aunt from New Haven. She scrolled again. Slower. Her name was not there. She set the phone down, picked up jar 44, checked the seal, picked up 45. Then she texted Gianna privately. Did you mean to leave me off the group text? The commercial refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car alarm cycled through its full repertoire and gave up. Gianna's response came in 2 parts. First, oh, Val. Then, the Ferraras are old money and very connected in the food world. Dominic's father knows everyone in the restaurant industry. I just don't want awkward questions about what you do and then me having to explain the whole catering assistant situation. It's just easier this way. You understand, right? It's not personal. Valentina read it once, set the phone face down, picked up jar 46. It's not personal. 5 years of building something that would make the Ferrara family's restaurant group look like a lemonade stand, and her older sister had just decided she was too embarrassing to seat at a table. Not personal, as though embarrassment was ever about anything except the most personal arithmetic there was, the quiet calculation of who you decide is worth counting. She finished the last 12 jars in silence, covered the pallet, set the 6 a.m. alarm. Before she left, she paused at the far wall, where a single cast iron pan hung on a steel hook above the prep station, black with age and use, the handle worn smooth where a thumb had gripped it 10,000 times before hers. Nonna Rosa's pan. The first thing she'd mounted when she signed the commercial lease, before she'd bought a single piece of equipment, before she'd hired Marco, before she sent the cold email to the Whole Foods buyer that changed everything. She touched the edge of it, just briefly. Then she went home. She had been 22 when Nonna Rosa first let her adjust a recipe. Not help, adjust. The distinction mattered enormously. Helping someone cook was a courtesy. Adjusting a recipe was a conversation between equals, and Nonna Rosa did not offer that conversation lightly. They were making the truffle honey, a recipe Nonna Rosa had carried from Palermo, folded inside a letter, the ink faded to the color of weak tea. Valentina tasted it and said, quietly, that she thought the rosemary was competing with the truffle note rather than supporting it. Nonna Rosa looked at her for a long moment. Say that again. The rosemary is too assertive. Pull it back by a third. Add a small amount of time. The truffle comes forward without losing the herbal complexity. Nonna Rosa handed her the rosemary without a word and watched her work. When they tasted the adjusted batch, she set her spoon down with the deliberate care of someone marking a moment. The kitchen doesn't lie, she said. Neither should you. Remember that. That same year, Valentina told her father she wanted to build something from Nonna Rosa's recipes, a product line, small batch, artisanal, authentic. She had 3 months of market research, a notebook full of competitor analysis, and a 5-year projection her business professor had called unusually sophisticated for undergraduate work. Carlo Russo listened over Sunday dinner with the warm, patient expression of a man hearing something he had already decided not to take seriously. Tesoro, he said, refilling his wine, the food industry is brutal. Margins are razor thin. Distribution alone would break you. He squeezed her hand with genuine affection. That's why God gave us Gianna. Maybe when you're more settled, she can help you think through something like this properly. Gianna, across the table, did not look up from her phone. Valentina closed her notebook. She did not open it again in front of her family for 5 years. Instead, she took a job assisting a small catering operation. Her family accepted this with the gentle pity reserved for people they had already decided were doing their best with limited tools. Her mother told people Valentina was finding her path. Her father occasionally mentioned that a restaurant group Gianna's firm consulted for was always looking for reliable kitchen staff if she ever wanted him to make a call. What they did not see was what happened after the catering shifts. The notebooks, the supplier calls, the late nights rebuilding Nonna Rosa's recipes with the precision of someone who understood that nostalgia without consistency was just sentiment, and sentiment did not scale. When Nonna Rosa died, she left Valentina the cast iron pan, the full recipe archive, and $22,000 in savings, with a note in her looping Sicilian hand. For the kitchen you are going to build, not the one I had, the one you showed me when you fixed the honey. Build that one. Don't be small. Valentina took 1 week to grieve. Then she signed a commercial lease, called Marco Delgado, who had once told her her truffle honey was the best thing he tasted in 10 years in working in food, and said 4 words. I'm doing it. In? He said yes before she finished the sentence. That was 3 years ago. Cucina Vera now moved $14 million in annual revenue, 11 SKUs, 340 Whole Foods locations across the southeastern and mid-Atlantic United States. And for the past 6 months, Grupo Sabor had been quietly circling with acquisition interest. Her family thought she was still doing catering work. She had never corrected them, not because she was hiding, because they had never asked. She was in the kitchen Tuesday morning when Sophia appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 coffees and wearing the expression she wore when something had happened and she needed Valentina to be ready for it. Sophia confirmed, Food and Wine, Saturday morning, digital edition. Valentina took the coffee. The headline? Sophia read from her phone. The sauce that started in a Sicilian grandmother's kitchen and ended up on the tables of America's best restaurants. The untold story of Valentino Russo and Cucina Vera. The kitchen was very quiet. Saturday, Valentina said. Saturday. She thought about Gianna's text, the 14 names, the Ferrara estate in Connecticut, black tie, Sunday. Don't change the date, she said. Sophia studied her with the look of someone who understood exactly what she wasn't being told and had decided to respect it completely. Okay, she said simply. Valentina picked up her inventory clipboard. Let's talk about the Grupo Sabor meeting. And she went back to work. She drove to the cemetery before sunrise. Not for drama. Valentina Russo was constitutionally opposed to drama. She went because the Food and Wine feature dropped at 6 a.m. and she wanted the first person she told to be Nonna Rosa. She brought fresh basil from the kitchen garden. Nonna Rosa had always said flowers were performative, but herbs were honest. Elena Marchetti had spent 8 months on the piece. 3 facility visits, 14 hours of interviews. She had spoken to Marco, to Sophia, to the Whole Foods regional buyer who had taken a chance on an unknown brand based on nothing except product quality and a cold email so well argued he'd read it twice. She had reviewed the financials, tasted every product in the line, described the truffle honey as the kind of thing that makes you question every purchase you made before it. The piece was extraordinary. Valentina read it aloud to the headstone in the early morning quiet. When she reached the paragraph about Nonna Rosa, the recipes, the cast iron pan, the $22,000, the note, her voice did not crack. But she stopped for a moment, looked at the stone, and breathed slowly through her nose until she was sure of herself. We did it, Nonna, she said quietly. I think we actually did it. The basil shifted in the morning breeze. Her phone began at 8:43 a.m. Marco, Valentina, food and wine. I'm crying in a parking lot. Sophia, we're trending. Bloomberg already called. Her former catering supervisor genuinely bewildered. Val, is this you? The article? This is actually you? Her mother at 10:47, Valentina Maria Russo. There is an article in Food and Wine about you. Call me this instant. Then Gianna. Valentina looked at Gianna's name on the screen, set the phone face down on the bench, watched a cardinal land on a nearby stone and leave again, apparently dissatisfied. Then she picked it up and answered. Val? Gianna's voice was tight. Where are you? A cemetery. What? I'm visiting Nonna Rosa. Okay, Val. Vincent Ferrara pulled up the article 20 minutes ago at brunch. He recognized the brand name immediately. His restaurant group has been trying to source Cucina Vera for months. He showed Dominic. Dominic asked me why I told his parents you were a catering assistant. Her voice climbed. Everyone at the table read the article. His father wants an introduction. I need you to tell me what is happening. Valentina let a beat of silence pass. A long one. You didn't want me at the party because my job was embarrassing. You didn't know. You didn't ask. Her voice was quiet, completely controlled. In 5 years, you have not once asked me what I was actually doing. Not once. You decided what I was, and you stopped looking. That's not my silence. That's your choice. Val, I'm trying to explain to Dominic's entire family why I excluded my own sister from an engagement party because you were embarrassed by me. She said it without heat, the way you state a fact about weather. Those were your words. I'm just agreeing with you. The silence on Gianna's end changed texture, less frantic, more hollow. I didn't know, she said again, quieter, the defensiveness draining out, leaving something raw underneath. I know you didn't. That's exactly the problem. She ended the call. Her father called at 11:15. Carlo Russo cried at exactly 3 things in his life: the end of Il Postino, Nonna Rosa's funeral, and the day Gianna made partner. He was crying now, which was the 4th thing, and that told Valentina something she hadn't been prepared for. I read the whole piece, every word. She waited. There's a quote from Marco. He says you named the company after something your grandmother used to say, Cucina Vera, the true kitchen. His voice was unsteady. I didn't know you remembered her saying that. The cemetery was very still. I remember everything, Dad, she said softly. You just never asked. He was quiet for a long time. I told you to focus on being a good catering assistant, he finally said. It wasn't a question. It was a man measuring the distance between who he had been and what that had cost. I told you to focus on being a good catering assistant, he finally said. It wasn't a question. It was a man measuring the distance between who he had been and what that had cost. You told me Gianna would help me think through a business properly. I was 22. I had 3 months of market research and a 5-year projection my professor called unusually sophisticated. I wanted $10,000 and your belief. You gave me neither. The silence stretched. Valentina? His voice broke on the last syllable of her name. Dad. She kept her voice steady, because one of them had to. I didn't build this in secret. I built it in silence. There's a difference. I was here the whole time. You just weren't looking. She heard him exhale. Can I see the kitchen? His voice was small. Not the company, the kitchen, the one you built with her recipes. Something shifted in Valentina's chest, small but seismic. Call me Tuesday, after 2. She hung up, sat for a long moment beside the headstone. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Miss Russo. The voice was measured, patrician, accustomed to being listened to.
My name is Vincent Ferrara. I believe you know my son. I've been attempting to reach the founder of Cucina Vera through official channels for 6 months, and I've just discovered this morning at my own engagement brunch that she is my future daughter-in-law's sister. A beat. I owe you an apology, he said, and I believe we have a business conversation that is long overdue. Valentina stood, brushed grass from her jeans, looked at the headstone one last time. Monday, she said. Wonderful. I can have my assistant arrange my kitchen, my terms.
A brief silence, then with what sounded like genuine respect, of course. She ended the call, touched the headstone once, lightly, with her fingertips. Monday, she said quietly. Then she walked back to her car, drove to her kitchen, and got back to work. On Monday, Valentina arrived at 5 a.m., not because Vincent Ferrara was coming at 10, because the kitchen was where she thought clearly, and she had a great deal to think clearly about. She made the truffle honey first, not for inventory, just to make it, the way Nonna Rosa used to cook on important mornings, not to produce something, but to remember who you were before the world arrived with its opinions and its offers and its sudden, convenient interest in you. She pulled the rosemary back by a third, added the thyme, watched the honey warm, tasted it at the right moment. Perfect, exactly as it had always been. Marco arrived at 7 with 2 coffees and said nothing for 4 full minutes, which was one of his finest qualities. You ready? He finally asked. I've been ready for 3 years. I know. He set her coffee beside her. I just like asking. Vincent Ferrara arrived at 10 o'clock precisely, which told her something useful about him. His son Dominic came with him, visibly uncomfortable in the way of a man who had recently discovered that the architecture of his own assumptions was poorly constructed. Vincent stepped into the kitchen and stopped. He looked at the copper pots, the cast iron pan on the wall, the finished palette along the far station, the whiteboard where Valentina tracked production ratios in her precise, angular handwriting. He took it all in with the slow, comprehensive attention of a man recalibrating. My head of procurement told me the founder was impossible to reach, he said quietly, almost to himself. I wasn't impossible. I was selective. Fair, he said simply. They sat. Marco poured water. Valentina set a tasting board on the table, the truffle honey, the basil oil, the aged tomato conserva, and said nothing. She let the product speak first. You don't explain the food. You let them taste it and watch their face tell the truth. Vincent tasted the truffle honey, set the spoon down with a deliberateness that Valentina recognized in her bones, because she had seen that exact gesture once before, in a kitchen in Atlanta, when she was 22 years old and a woman had handed her a sprig of rosemary to see what she'd do with it. Miss Rousseau, he said, what do you want? She had prepared for many versions of this conversation. The version where he lowballed her. The version where he tried to absorb the brand and sand down its edges. The version where Dominic's presence made things personal and tangled. She had not prepared for simple directness, and the simplicity of it clarified everything instantly. The name stays, Cucina Vera, permanently, in any agreement under any ownership. Non-negotiable. Agreed. She looked at Dominic directly for the first time. I don't hold your family against your business, but I need those two things kept entirely separate. If they blur, the deal doesn't work. Dominic held her gaze. Understood. Good. She looked back at Vincent. Have your people call Sophia Reyes. She'll walk you through our terms document. Vincent stood and extended his hand. I've been in this industry 40 years, Miss Russo. I've sat across from a great many founders. He paused. I should have found you sooner. Yes, Valentina said simply. You should have. The family dinner happened 3 weeks later. Not at a restaurant, not at her parents' house. at Valentina's kitchen, because these were her terms, and she had learned, finally and permanently, that her terms were the only ones worth sitting down to. Lucia arrived carrying a dish made from one of Nonna Rosa's recipes, a gesture so precise in its meaning that Valentina had to look away when she saw it. Carlo came in and stood in the kitchen doorway the same way Vincent Ferreira had, taking everything in slowly. But where Vincent's recalibration had been professional, Carlo's was something raw, something fatherly and late and genuinely sorry. He walked to the far wall, stood in front of Nonna Rosa's cast iron pan, looked at it without speaking. "You gave her this," he said finally. "She gave me everything," Valentina said, "when you didn't know what I needed." He turned. His eyes were full. "I know." A breath. "I'm sorry, Valentina. Not because of the article, not because of the company, because you were 22 years old with a notebook full of ideas, and I told you to go be a good assistant." His voice broke. "That's what I'm sorry for." Valentina looked at her father, smaller than she remembered him, older than she'd been paying attention to, and felt something in her chest loosen. Not dissolve, not disappear, just loosen, the way a knot loosens when the right pressure is applied from exactly the right direction. "Then be present now," she said. "That's all I'm asking. Not credit, not involvement, just presence. Show up for who I actually am, not what I achieved." "Yes," he said. "Yes, that I can do." Gianna arrived last, alone, without Marcus, which Valentina hadn't expected, and which told her more than an hour of conversation would have. She stood in the doorway with an expression scrubbed clean of performance. No polish, no management, just a woman who had spent 3 weeks beginning to understand the specific shape of what she had done. "I've been thinking," Gianna said, "about the last time I asked you a real question about your life, about what you were building." She stopped. "I can't remember one. Not one, Val, in 5 years. Valentina said nothing. Let it land where it needed to. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," Gianna said. "I'm asking if I can start." The kitchen was very quiet. "You can start," Valentina said. They ate together, all of them, around the prep station converted to a dinner table, with Nonna Rosa's recipes feeding them, and the cast iron pan on the wall witnessing everything. It was not perfect. It was not the family they had been before, because that family had never been entirely honest. It was something newer and more fragile, built on better ground, which, Valentina thought, was exactly how every worthwhile thing begins. 6 months later, the Cucina Vera acquisition closed at $38 million, with full creative retention and Nonna Rosa's name permanently woven into the brand's origin story on every label, every campaign, every platform. And that's what mattered. Everything that mattered was protected. Of course, as it should be. That story was a lit. Did you guys really enjoy the story? Was there a moment where you feel I could have developed the story even more differently? I want you all to tell me how you feel about this story. It'll mean a lot to me. Drop your comments. Let's have that discussion. See you in my next video. Keep loving yourself all day.